Hey everybody, welcome to ARE Live. I'm Patrick Finnegan, producer of ARE Live here at Black Spectacles, and I'm joined with architect Chris Hopstock, who's going to review several programming and analysis mock exam questions. We're going to go through questions that cover PA knowledge and skills related to determining required survey types for zoning compliance, identifying structural updates from demolition scope, evaluating diagrams against programmatic client requirements, addressing zoning and scope changes in multifamily projects, and choosing foundations for sloped and sensitive sites. If you're joining us for the first time, Black Spectacles is the leader in ARE prep. We work with learning scientists and architects to ensure you're studying the right content and that you retain it so you can pass on the first try. We've built everything you need to pass the exams, including new video lectures with motion graphics and 3D animation, practice exams that are as close to the real thing as you can get, and unlike anyone else, with our Pass the ARE guarantee, in the unlikely event that you don't pass your exams, we'll pay for your retake to take your next exam. You'll also receive access to our deck of flashcards, which you can customize, and quizzes after each video lecture section, and detailed content on the hardest parts of the exams. Lastly, our guided study process organizes all of your study material into a daily study plan, showing you what to study each day that you can customize to align with your exam date. And they're all built upon a curriculum that ensures you're learning the right content, and they all work together with our custom-built platform to ensure that you retain the information so you remember it for the exams. With our ARE prep material, our pass rates are 40% higher than the national average, and our members report passing in half the time of the national average. And we're very excited to announce the launch of a brand new CSE course designed to help you pass the California supplemental exam in record time. You'll get everything you need to pass the CSE on your first try, including expert crafted California specific study materials, a practice exam that is as close to the real thing as you can get, customizable flashcards and quizzes, and a structured study plan customized to your exam date. You can join today at blackspectacles.com/CSE-pricing to take advantage of a 10% discount for the first 100 members. And if you're using Black Spectacles through your firm, be sure to let your firm leadership know about this so they can unlock access for your entire team. Over on our Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook social channels, we post daily mock exam questions. So if you don't already follow us, I'd suggest that you do. We're at black.spectacles on Instagram and TikTok, and just Black Spectacles on Facebook. Our next ARE Live will be on September 17th, where we'll be covering a CE mock exam. You can go to blackspectacles.com/podcast to sign up. And we offer a referral program for firms and schools where if you introduce us to your boss or HR, and if they sign up, we'll send you a $250 gift card of your choice. To participate, follow the instructions on blackspectacles.com/group-referral. And we also offer a refer a friend program where you can sign up to receive a customized discount code to save your friend 15% off any membership. And you'll receive a $50 gift card of your choice when they sign up. You can go to blackspectacles.com/referral to participate. And we're going to be engaging exclusively on our online Black Spectacles community. So head over to community.blackspectacles.com, and right at the top, you'll see we've pinned a thread called ARE Live PA Mock Exam August 2025. If you have any questions as we're going through ARE Live today, post your questions there and we'll answer them live at the end of the session. And everyone who posts in that thread today will be eligible to win a free Black Spectacles t-shirt. Literally, all you have to do is go over to community.blackspectacles.com and say hi, and you're registered. And of course, don't forget to stay tuned until the end of the episode to see if you've won. And with that, I'd like to welcome today's guest, Chris Hopstock. In addition to working with us here at Black Spectacles, Chris is an architect based in New York. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks for that intro, Patrick. I'm glad to be back and chatting about these PA questions. So I think a great way to understand what types of questions you're going to encounter on the ARE is to go straight to the source and review NCARB's mock exams for each division. We've done that pretty extensively here at Black Spectacles, and it's helped inform all of our content, particularly our practice exams and quizzes, which we use these exams so that we can understand the types of questions that NCARB thinks are worthwhile for each division, and so that we can help you prepare to answer those questions and also reproduce similar type questions in our materials. So if you do that for the PA exam, if you look at NCARB's practice exams, you're going to notice that there's a really high percentage of questions that have some sort of image that you need to interpret to answer the question. Sometimes you're going to see a chart, a site plan, a survey, an excerpt from a document, etc. And a lot of these times you may have never seen that type of image before, that type of chart before, and that's perfectly okay. Today, I want to go over some of these image-based questions and how you can strategize to answer them quickly. So with that, let's take a look at question number 1. My strategy for these types of questions is I'm going to read the question and the answer choices first before I really look at the exhibit, which in this case is on the right. So let's do that. Refer to the exhibit. An architect is working with a client who wishes to include small-scale wind turbines at their rural boutique hotel property on a large hilly site. The architect researched the requirements in the local zoning ordinance and located the town's requirements for construction documents for such a system. Which of the following should the architect request from the client? A, an ALTA survey, B, a topographic survey, C, a copy of the deed, or D, approval of an additional service request, or ASR, for surveying services. So now that I've read the question and the answer choices, we're going to read through this zoning excerpt on the right, and we're going to keep the choices in mind as we read through this. We're looking for clues in this document as to why one choice might be correct or incorrect. This excerpt starts with, applications shall be accompanied by. First item is a copy of the town tax map of the subject parcel showing all property owners within 200 feet of the subject parcel. Okay, I don't think we really saw anything in our answer choices that had to do with that. Letter B, proof of mailing to all property owners within 200 feet. Again, didn't see anything in our choices about that. That kind of relates to A in this list also. So it seems like the town wants to make sure that all property owners within 200 feet of these wind turbines know about it and have a chance to probably voice their displeasure or pleasure in the project before it gets approved. And then moving on here, C, the town is looking for a detailed plot plan drawn to scale and accurately dimensions, which shall include the following information: property lines and physical dimensions of the applicant's property, so that's your client's property, the location, dimensions, and types of all existing structures on the property, the location of the proposed small wind energy system, foundations, guy anchors, and equipment, and setback requirements pursuant to Article 3, and the minimum distance of 110% of the system's height away from power lines, power lines, public and private roads, rights of way, and or easements. Okay, so in reading through the requirements, it's pretty clear that we need some sort of survey so that we can prepare a drawing showing all of the required information listed in item C. I think at this point we can eliminate a copy of the deed, choice C, and choice D, and ASR for surveying services. While it might be nice to have a copy of the deed in addition to the survey, a deed alone is not going to help you prepare this application for a wind farm. At best, it's going to provide you with a legal description of a site, which is words that describe the lengths and bearing angles of the property lines or something like that. So I think that's incorrect. And then D is incorrect because generally the owner hires the surveyor, not the architect, according to the B101. And when you're taking the ARE, unless the question says otherwise, I would assume that you're operating under the provisions of the B101. That leaves choices A and B, and the question really is, what kind of survey do we need here? So generally speaking, an ALTA survey describes property lines, encroachments, easements, and other features that are important really for real estate transactions. Topographic surveys show all of this information as well, but they show contour lines on a site. The question says that this particular site is said to be large and hilly, and the application requirements say that we need to show where we're proposing to place the wind turbines. Of course, we want to consider the site's topography when we're making those decisions, so I would say a topographic survey would be best in this situation. So I would choose choice B here, topographic survey. On the PA exam, I think you can expect a few questions like this because zoning is super localized. So the ARE, if you're going to get a question about the contents of something in a zoning ordinance, they're going to need to provide you with an excerpt from zoning text to test if you're able to understand them, firstly, and then secondly, apply them to a given situation like here. And with that, I think we can move on to question 2.
Thanks, Chris. Not seeing any questions so far in the community, but if you have any questions that pop up during today's ARE Live session, you can go to community.blackspectacles.com, and we have a thread there called ARE Live PA Mock Exam August 2025. Drop them in there and I'll bring them up live to Chris. But with that, let's roll on to question number 2.
Sounds good. Okay, refer to the exhibit. A project architect prepared a demolition plan and a junior architect on the project team is working on schematic design plans for the project. The project calls for incorporating the existing covered porch into the interior space of the building, expanding the dining room. Based on the demolition plan, which of the following is likely going to be required? Check the 3 that apply. A, complete demolition and repiping of the plumbing system. B, new doors between the dining room and former porch area. C, a new beam at the existing wall between the dining room and porch. D, capped plumbing lines at the former powder room. E, additional support under the kitchen island, or F, a new outswing door at the staircase down. So similar to the last question, I think it made sense to read through each choice here and analyze it while we're looking at the question, rather than trying to look at this, while we're looking at the diagram, rather than taking a look at the diagram and then trying to figure out the diagram, then reading the question. I think you can spend a lot of time doing that. There's so much information in drawings, and I recommend going about it in this approach. So now that we've read the question and the choices, let's go one by one through the choices, remembering that we're looking for 3 correct answers here. So choice A, complete demo and repiping of the plumbing system. So just to talk about this drawing for a second, this is a demo drawing, a demolition drawing. And if you're not familiar with these, maybe you focused on new construction in your office. The convention with a demo drawing is that the heavy dashed lines show what's going to be demolished. And there are also going to be some notes as well for items that dashed lines alone aren't going to convey the necessary information. So with that said, let's look around the drawing for clues about what's changed related to the plumbing system. Well, you can see in the lower left of the plan, we've got a half bath with fixtures dashed and a note saying that we're converting that room to a dry pantry. Just above that, we're demolishing kitchen cabinets and a refrigerator. Does any of that mean we need to demo and replace the entire plumbing system? I would say no, we can simply cap the plumbing, potentially reuse some sections of the pipe or remove some sections of the pipe, but it's not necessary to remove and replace the entire system just for converting a powder room to a non-powder room, a dry pantry in this case, and removing a refrigerator. So I think this one is going to be incorrect. Let's look at choice B. New doors between the dining room and former porch. So the drawing shows we're demolishing this wall with a door and windows between these 2 spaces, but the question says that the project calls for incorporating the existing porch into the interior space, into the interior dining room in this case. So if we're expanding the dining room, we want to make it larger, it wouldn't really make sense to have doors here. It would kind of defeat the purpose of demolishing this wall. So with that, I think that this one is going to be incorrect because the question states we're looking for a larger open room here, and new doors don't really jive with that description in the question itself. Choice C, a new beam above the same wall. Well, given what we just said about turning these 2 smaller spaces into an open large space, I think we need to think about this option. The wall we're demolishing is an exterior wall. It's usually safe to assume that this would be a load-bearing wall, but another clue that it's a load-bearing wall here is that just below it, on the bottom part of this drawing, there's a wall with some posts in it that indicate that, they show that the short dimension of the dining room is going sort of north to south in this drawing, right? That indicates to me that joists are bearing on that existing exterior wall, and they're also bearing on the bottom wall in this drawing. So if we remove the existing wall between the porch and the dining room, we're removing the support on one end of those joists. So I think we definitely need a new beam at this existing wall, and I would say choice C is correct. All right, choice D, capped plumbing lines at the former powder room. So this choice is sort of the opposite of choice A, which we already talked about and we said was incorrect. Capping the plumbing lines here is just a more economical solution. So I would say that this choice D is totally correct, and the way that it would be done. Additional support under the island. So the kitchen islands often have double joists or some sort of additional support under them, maybe a post, and that's because you could conceivably have 8 or so people standing around the island at a party or something, and that's quite the amount of weight in a relatively small area. So in general, additional support under an island is a good idea, but taking a look at this drawing, it looks like the island and the sink cabinets aren't really changing. Nothing here is being demolished. There's no heavy dash lines. There's no notes. I would sort of hold off on thinking that this is correct until I take a look at choice F. So let's do that. Because remember, we're choosing 3 here. We've already got 2 correct, so we're kind of choosing between choices E and F now. So choice F, a new outswing door at the staircase down. Well, we're demoing the existing door already because it's dashed, so we do need a new door going down to the staircase. And interestingly, the existing door swings over the steps going down, which is not up to code. Doors can't swing over steps It's a safety issue. People expect a flat area on each side of a door when they open it, especially in an emergency. You're not thinking about it. You just kind of go by instinct and you expect that landing. So this door really should swing outward. So I would say it's a better choice than E, leaving us with correct answers: C, a new beam; D, capped plumbing; and F, a new outswing door at the staircase. And if we've got no questions in the community, we can move on to choice 3, question 3.
Yeah, looks like we got one. I'm gonna roll back to question number 1. This one's around the Alta survey. They're asking, right of way and easement are in the Alta survey. Do you have any comments on that?
Right-of-ways and easements and things like that are certainly in an Alta survey. An Alta survey provides a lot of the information that you need here that's listed in the zoning text here, but it's not going to provide you with topographic information, which if you're going to figure out where to put the proposed small wind energy system, which is required in the second to last point there, on this large hilly site, you're really going to need to know the topography of the site in order to do that. You definitely want to consider hills and things like that when you're placing essentially any site improvement, but specifically wind turbines, so that you can place them at an appropriate location.
Gotcha, thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say another thing I'll say on the ARE: when you see Alta survey ever on the ARE, just think about it, a real estate transaction. They're really used by title companies and attorneys for seeing if there's any easements or other encumbrances on the property, making sure that the lot lines that are drawn on that survey match the deed, the legal description in the deed, and that sort of thing. I know in practice, architects will use Alta surveys as a starting point for projects, but for the ARE, think of an Alta survey as more of a legal document than a drawing that shows you what's going on the site.
Gotcha. And then I got one more around question number 2, Chris. So Hayden's asking, does this question go too specific of a schematic design phase, which doesn't align with the PA scope? Essentially, will this kind of question appear on the real test?
I think it's possible. I think, usually when you're doing a renovation or an addition to a project, relatively early on, you're figuring out what needs to get demolished and what needs to remain so that you can design your renovation or addition, right? So I know it looks a little bit more than what you might see in a schematic design, but it's in my experience relatively common for a project like that.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Let's roll on to question number 3.
Okay, question 3. A project manager is reviewing several bubble diagrams that the project architect has prepared prior to a client meeting for a new convenience store. The client shared the following programmatic requirements prior to the meeting: aisle adjacent to counter for customer service, staff-only bathroom accessible via the kitchen, aisle directly adjacent to the counter and walk-in refrigerator, which is abbreviated as REF period on the drawings, and the office should be as far away from the aisle as possible. Which of the following diagrams best responds to the client's program? And we've got 4 options here. So this is really a classic PA question. We're given a pretty short program, this one specifically about adjacencies, and 4 diagrams, and we're asked to choose the best diagram that corresponds with the program. I think the best way to answer a question like this is to look at each diagram one by one, look at each bullet point, and then determine if it meets the requirements of that bullet point, and just sort of go on methodically like that. You might get lucky and choice A might meet all of the requirements, for example, so this could be a quick question. You might get unlucky and it might be choice D, and you've got to go through all of them to figure that out. So let's see if we are lucky or unlucky here. Option A, so that's in the top left. So the aisle is directly adjacent to the counter, but the staff bathroom doesn't seem to be adjacent to the kitchen. Sometimes these diagrams are drawn with different lines connecting the bubbles. This one seems to just use actual adjacencies between the bubbles to indicate what's close to what. And just looking at the next point here, the aisle is not directly adjacent to the refrigerator. The counter's between them. So I think option A is probably incorrect. So let's take a look at choice B here. Following the same process, we've got an aisle next to the counter, but we've got similar issues to choice A. It looks like the bath might not be adjacent to the kitchen and the refrigerator is all the way in the back. I think this one definitely can't be correct. So we should move on to choice C here. All right, again, the aisle is adjacent to the counter, so that's great. Here, the bath is adjacent to the kitchen, so that's good. The fridge is still not accessible to the aisle, and the program requires this, so I think this one might be incorrect. At this point, you can probably just choose D and move on if you're kind of pressed for time on the exam, because you've eliminated B and C. I mean, we think A maybe is correct. It's not terrible, but if you're pressed for time, you could go with D. But let's take a look at it. D has the aisle next to the counter. It's got the staff bathroom off the kitchen and it's tucked into the back, so it definitely meets the staff only requirement in the program. The refrigerator seems accessible to the aisle, and the office is on the total opposite corner of the diagram from the aisle. So I think this one is the best choice. I'm glad we went through it, so we have some more confidence there. And I would go with choice D on this one. Just another note on this question, when you're studying for PA, you're going to see these kinds of diagrams. We have some great videos about all the types of diagrams you might need to know about for the PA division. Keep in mind that they're diagrams. Different people might draw them differently. Don't get thrown off on the ARE if the diagram you see in a question is a little bit different from the type of diagram. Maybe it has the same name, but it's just drawn differently than you're used to seeing. You have to remember that the ARE questions are written by many different people, and they're going to have different styles of drawing. They might have just different drawings in their files that they're using for these questions that they're just not going to look the same. So try to get to the underlying idea of the drawing and don't focus on if it's a little bit different from what you're used to seeing. And if there's no questions there, I think we can move on to question 4.
Yeah, looks like no questions on our end. If you have any questions, you can drop them in our community thread that we have at community.blackspectacles.com. But with that, let's roll on to question number 4.
Cool. So an architect was recently hired by a developer client to design a new multifamily residential project in an R3 zone, which allows for an FAR of 2.0 and a maximum of 35 feet in building height. The original program was as follows: ground floor with small lobby and 5 units, second and third floors with 6 units each and identical floor plates, 3 unit types, studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, and a communal rooftop garden above the top floor. Shortly after signing an agreement with the client informed the architect that they'd like to add an additional floor to the project, adding 6 additional units. The additional 4th floor will have 3 bedroom units with small terraces. Which of the following should the architect consider? Check the 3 that apply. A, propose expanding each floor to fit the additional units rather than adding a 4th floor. B, eliminate the rooftop garden. C, an additional service fee for variance request preparation. D, supplemental service fee for variance request preparation. E, additional fees for coordinating transfers between the 3rd and 4th floors. And F, suggest that the client find an alternate site that can accommodate the project's floor area. So we've got an original project brief and some changes that the client wanted to make, and we need to figure out what we should be thinking about given these changes. So we're choosing 3 correct answers here out of the 6. So let's go through the choices. Choice A, expanding each floor rather than adding a 4th floor. So the original plan was 3 stories, and we have a maximum height of 35 feet according to the project brief. 4 stories just simply aren't going to fit in a 35-foot height. So the connection you're expected to make here is that we'd need to apply for a variance in order to do this new program. Given that, it might be good to think about how we can avoid a variance. They generally take time and money, and there's no guarantee that you'll be granted the variance. So it could all be sort of a waste, and you're back to square one anyway. So if you can avoid doing that and still meet the client's programmatic goals, which expanding the floor plate certainly can achieve if there's space on site, I think it's a good idea. So I think choice A is totally a realistic option. And we're not given any information here about whether or not that might be possible. The question doesn't say it's a tight urban infill site with certain setbacks and the floor plates maxed out. Like we just don't know. So it's in the absence of that information, it's sort of a reasonable answer to this question. Okay, choice B, eliminating the rooftop garden. I don't think anything in this question really implies that the garden's problematic. If the question talked about cost being an issue, or maybe the weight of the garden might be problematic, garden soil and plants are super heavy. So if you have a project like this, you should definitely talk to your structural engineer early to account for that weight. If it said anything like that, I think we consider it, but the garden's not going to affect our height issue, and I don't think it really makes sense to propose removing it here given what we're told. And I would say also, as a practical matter, it's probably not going to be a correct choice on the ARE to remove an element like this without sort of an amazing reason. Gardens add to project sustainability, occupant health and happiness, and so on and so forth. So like I said, unless this question had some really specific information in it about why the garden had to go, I wouldn't choose this choice. So with that, let's move on to choice C, an ASR or additional service request for variance preparation. So like we said when we were talking about choice A, this project as currently proposed with these changes would require a height variance. Height variances or any type of variances aren't included in the architect's basic services in the B101. So I would mark this as correct. And then looking at D, D is almost the same as choice C, but D is talking about supplemental services rather than additional services. So you can kind of group these two together, and whenever I see two choices like this on a question, I'm immediately thinking one of them is going to be correct. So just the difference here is that we've already signed a contract with the owner. It says that in the beginning of the question. So we're going to use an additional service here rather than a supplemental service. And I think an easy way to think about that is additional services are added onto sort of at a later time after you've signed a contract, whereas supplemental services, think of the word supplement, they're in conjunction with, you're adding them on when you sign the contract, they're in that original contract. So to summarize there, C, additional services, is correct and D is not, just based on the timing of where we are in the project. Moving on here to choice E, additional fees for coordination of some items. So the original project was pretty simple, but we're adding a new floor plate on the 4th floor with large units and terraces. There's certainly some coordination to work through up there. You're going to have some beams for terraces. Terraces usually have some sort of a drop to them, so you're going to end up with some sort of beams in the floor system. You're probably going to have offsets for vertical mechanicals and plumbing shafts, unless you can really align those things, which is probably unlikely in all scenarios. So you're going to have some offsets here. It's going to require coordination on your part as the architect, and it probably wasn't considered in the original proposal. The original proposal was this ground floor with 5 units and a small lobby, and then 6 units each on the other 2 floors with identical floor plates. You probably had very little transfers and things like that to have to coordinate. So I think you need to consider some additional fees for that work. So I would say choice E is correct. And that's 3 correct answers, and that's all we're looking for. So on the ARE, you don't necessarily need to look at choice F, but let's just take a look at it quickly. Choice F suggests that the client find an alternate site that can accommodate the project's floor area. I think suggesting that the client look for an alternate site is not really a realistic option kind of ever, and the question doesn't imply that floor area is an issue here. We can't even calculate the floor area in this question because we don't have a lot area, we don't have the size of the floor plates. All we're told is that the floor area of the site is 2.0, which is a distractor in the question. So for those 2 reasons, I think choice F is just a distractor here and not correct. And with that, if there's no questions in the community, we can move on to question 5, the last one.
Gotcha. Yeah, it looks like we don't have any right now. Joseph, I see you're asking one question, but that's just about how like the community works. I'll send you a reply on that right now, but no questions on question number 4 right now. So let's roll on to the last one.
Sounds good. Question 5, an architect is designing a new pavilion on a rural sloping site. The small pavilion will be located on an overlook with views of the surrounding forest. The client wants to minimize cut and fill activities on site to disturb as little of the existing landscape as possible. Which of the following foundation options is most appropriate for the project? A, slab on grade, B, stepped stem walls, C, closely spaced isolated footings, or D, concrete piles to bedrock. So not every question on the ARE will be super long with an exhibit. So here's an example of a relatively short question that I wanted to include just to give a full picture of what the PA exam can look like. And this question is simply testing your knowledge of what system is most appropriate in a given situation, which is a totally realistic thing to be doing at the planning phase of a project. So Looking at the question, we've got a small building on a slope. We want to minimize cut and fill. In studying foundation systems, you should know that foundations on slopes pose some specific challenges. You want to have a consistent depth of the foundation to protect against frost heave in northern climates, and also just in all climates provide adequate bearing. So slope sites make that a little bit challenging. Looking at the choices here, a slab on grade would generally work for this type of building. It's a common type of foundation for a small pavilion type building, but it's going to require a good amount of cutting and filling when you have a sloped site. You're going to set that slab at either the high point and require a bunch of fill below it, the low point and require a bunch of cutting above it, or somewhere in the middle and require cut and fill. There's just no way around it. It's just a flat slab cut into a hill, so it's going to require cutting and filling no matter how you do it. Since the question specifically says the client wants to minimize that, I would eliminate that choice for this question, even though it's a reasonable choice for the type of building we're talking about. And just a note here, there's probably a reason why that sentence is included, that the client wants to minimize cut and fill. Like when you're reading that, you should be thinking, okay, which of these choices does that apply to? And the answer here is that it applies to choice A and makes it incorrect. So moving on, stepped stem walls are typically how this type of foundation is achieved. Stem walls go down to frost depth or whatever minimum depth is required in your geographical region, and they step with the topography to maintain a consistent depth below the finished grade. And then atop these stem walls, you can create a floor system and you can have a basement or a crawl space beneath. So you kind of just dig a trench around this hill at varying depths, sort of minimizing the amount of cut and fill activity that you have, and you can leave the rest of the soil under what will be the floor system untouched. So there's definitely less cut and fill than a slab on grade. I think this is a pretty good choice here, but it's only choice B and we've got two more, so let's look at those two. Closely spaced isolated footings. So isolated footings could work for this type of a building if you're going to use some sort of maybe grade beam situation. But closely spaced isolating footings create bearing problems specifically on slope sites. So when you have closely spaced isolated footings, one footing could impose some additional surcharge load on the soils beneath another footing that can possibly create some differential settlement opportunities that we obviously want to avoid. So if this was simply isolated footings, I would have a dilemma here about whether C or B is correct, but including that closely spaced note here, I think makes this incorrect for me. So let's take a look at choice D, the last choice here, concrete piles to bedrock. Certainly would work. They pretty much could work for any type of building, but I would say that's a very costly option here for this pretty small building. We don't know where the bedrock is. It's likely a good deal deeper than you would need to go if you weren't trying to get down to bedrock. And this is just a small pavilion, so it doesn't necessarily need a massive foundation structure, right? On the ARE, when a project is small, like the one described here, I think you should be looking towards shallow foundation options, and piles are certainly a type of deep foundation. So with that, I think we can confidently choose choice B as the correct answer here. And we need to work out with our engineer in close consultation with the site survey to design the stepped footing system adequately. And that's all I've got today.
Great, thanks, Chris. Got a couple for question number 4, so I'm gonna roll back to that, and then I'm just gonna hit you with some rapid fire questions if that works for you too. Also just saw this one roll in. A couple of people are asking when the recorded session is gonna be available. So that's gonna be, give me a couple hours just to edit that, and that's gonna be up on YouTube, but you can also listen to it on Apple or Spotify podcasts too. You'll receive an email about this later, but I mean, you can just bank on it tonight. It'll be available for you to watch too. But for question number 4, can you give a little, someone's a little confused between additional and supplemental services. Can you give a little insights on that?
Yeah, definitely. So that is something that you'll study when you're studying for typically PCM, PJM, and even the CE division. I wanted to include it here because I noticed that some of those sort of project management type of questions and knowledge that you need to know were included in the NCARB demo exam as I was reading it. So I found that a little bit surprising the first time I noticed that a while ago. And I think it's important to recognize that the amount of overlap that's on these exams, right? But to get to the question itself, so the difference between these two has to do with when the change happens relative to when you signed your contract with the owner. So if you are, let's say, signing a contract to design a building for the owner, and they want to also include landscape design and interior design in your scope of services, you would include that as a supplemental service at that time, because you haven't signed a contract yet. You're just supplementing your basic services with these separate services. So they're incorporated into that original contract, say the B101. That's a supplemental service. Now, what could happen in a similar situation is that same owner hires you just for basic services with the B101. You guys sign on the dotted line, you get going, and then sometime down the road, the owner realizes, hey, I would really like for you guys to do the landscape and interior design. It's the same exact scope of services, right? But at this point, it's an additional service because you've already signed a contract. You are adding to that contract at a later date. It's just sort of, they're essentially the same thing. They're papered differently, but it is a very common question that you'll encounter on the ARE so that you can paper it correctly in real life.
Awesome, thanks. And then we have a couple around question number 4, and then I'm gonna roll to question number 5 after that too, just because we have a couple questions on that.
Yeah.
But one of them for question number 4 is, since we know that we can't go to the 4th floor, why would an additional fee for coordinating be the right one?
I wouldn't assume that we can't build a 4th floor just because there's a maximum height. That's why a variance could come into play. Variances allow you and the owner to propose slight modifications to the zoning to achieve a certain goal if you can prove that you have a hardship, right? So perhaps you're only looking for an extra 5 feet here so that you'll have 40 total feet to fit these 4 floors. Maybe you're providing a whole bunch of affordable housing. That's a great benefit to the community, and like some like open space that's open to the whole community, right? Maybe you're doing all these amazing things and the extra 5 feet is not a huge deal for the locality to make an exception for, that sort of thing. So that's a common thing you'll run into on the PA division is questions where you need to understand what a variance is, what a conditional use permit is, which is similar but not for bulk regulations like this one, but for use regulations. Basically, understanding these entitlement processes where you can attempt to get some sort of relief from zoning requirements if you've got a very good reason.
Awesome, thanks. And then the next one we have is for essentially option D. When would option D be considered? Option E mentions the coordination of transfers, assuming it is referring to a beam. They would have assumed that it was referencing a transfer beam. Is that incorrect?
Sorry, so they were asking why option D is incorrect because
yeah. It's not, I guess, why, but when would option D be considered? I guess that's a better way to say it.
Got it. Okay, so option D would be correct if this question said that an architect is about to sign a contract with a developer to design blah, blah, blah. It's just the only reason D is incorrect and C is correct is because of that sentence, which tells you the timing of what's happening here. So literally just changing that little verbiage in the beginning of the first sentence would change the correct answer.
2 more for question number 4. Is it right to assume that if the contract is signed and the project is in progress, that is never the right answer to, quote, find another site?
I think so. Yeah, I think fine. I think I've seen choices like this often that are super unrealistic. Like I couldn't imagine working for a client and there's a problem with the design that, you know, I've been hired to solve, quite frankly. And my solution is, why don't you just go buy a different site? I think it's a kind of a ridiculous thing for an architect to propose. But I've seen choices like that on the ARE on the demo exams, so I include it just to cover it. There are some questions on the ARE, specifically in the PA division, where you'll be asked to help a client determine what site is the best for a given program, and those types of questions, that's a little more realistic and something that I think is totally reasonable. But I would almost never choose a choice like choice F unless the question was really specific about why I think I should do that.
Cool. And then this one kind of rolls into that same explanation, but they're asking, how would you know that you actually can expand each floor? Like that option A is an option proposing expanding each floor compared to recommending another site, which would be option F.
You absolutely don't know based on this question, but that's a really good, it brings me to a really important point that just because you don't know if it's possible doesn't mean that it's not possible, right? This question just doesn't tell you if the site's big enough to do that. So you can't assume it's not big enough. You have to assume maybe I can make the floor plate a little bit bigger, or I can at least propose it. I mean, that's a reasonable thing to do. So I think that's the reason why I know in real life, you would obviously know the answer to that question as an architect. You would know how big the site is and if you can do that. But questions have to be sort of limited in the amount of information that they provide. So you can't possibly say everything that you would know in real life about this project in a question. It would get so long. So you need to sort of just practice just using the information you have to answer a question and thinking logically through it like that.
Thanks, Chris. And then I've got one for question number 5 too. And this one is, can you tell the difference between, or explain the difference between isolated footing and closely isolated footing?
So isolated footings are just standalone footings, usually square, they could be a rectangle, with some sort of a post above them or a column or something like that, or maybe a grade beam going across them that are spaced a normal distance apart, maybe 10 feet, maybe 15 feet, something like that. When you start putting them really close to each other, they just sort of, in terms of their bearing, get in the way of each other. So if you imagine a footing sitting on Earth and you were to draw a 45-degree angle from the bottom corner of each footing, that's kind of the area under the footing that the footing is bearing upon. So if you put them all really close to each other, those triangles that you're drawing start to overlap. You've got one footing that's bearing a little bit on the soil under another footing, and it just creates some issues where certain parts of the building, soil under the building could be getting a lot of load. Certain areas of the soil under the building are getting less load, and that can lead to some differential settlement and cracking and so on and so forth. But closely spaced isolated footings aren't like a type of foundation. Isolated footings are. Closely spaced is just an adjective describing them, like saying tall concrete piles or something like that.
Gotcha, cool. And then I've got just one more for question number 4 actually, and this is really just explaining why what option E is. And so coordinating transfers between the 3rd and 4th floors. Can you kind of explain that? They're not really understanding the reference. What's that referencing right here?
Sure, yeah. So if you've worked on multi-story buildings, what we've got here is the second bullet point down is saying that let's call it the typical floor, the 2nd and 3rd floors in the original program, they're noted as being identical floor plates. So when you have identical floor plates, all of your building services can just go straight through. Nothing has to move horizontally because the floor plates are identical. So think about your, let's say, bathroom exhaust ducts, right? They just go straight up and down. There's nothing has to move. That's super simple. And in your architectural drawings, you might not even have a separate floor plan for those 2 floors. It might just say typical 2nd and 3rd floor because they're exactly the same. When we're looking at this question and what the client wants to do with this 4th floor, it's totally different than the floors below it. So you're going to have to transfer probably some structure, right? You might have a column that works great on the 2nd and 3rd floor, but it's right in the middle of a living room on the 4th floor, for example. It's just not a good location. You might find that the same thing with some ductwork, some maybe electrical chases, just they don't work with the floor plan. So what you need to do is transfer them horizontally in the ceiling of the 3rd floor in this example to get to where you need them to go. And that's called a transfer floor in multi-story construction. And typically that floor will have some greater floor height to allow for these like horizontal runs of utilities, right? So that's kind of what this question is getting at. So The keys to me when I'm reading this question and thinking about choice E are I see identical floor plates in that second bullet, and then I see, oh, we're adding a fourth floor in this case that's just totally different. So I know I'm going to have more work to do to get the building services through those 2 floor plates.
Thanks so much, Chris. Looks like that's all the questions that we have today. But just want to say, Chris, it's been a pleasure to have you today. Thanks so much for helping to support the architecture community.
Yeah, glad I can do it. And if anybody has some questions that they're thinking about after this, you can just tag me at Coach Chris Hopstock in the community, and I'll be happy to answer them there.
Yeah, sounds good. And that is community.blackspectacles.com. Thanks. If you're joining us for the first time today, Black Spectacles is the leader in ARE prep. At Black Spectacles, we work with learning scientists and architects to ensure you're studying the right content and that you retain it so you can pass on the first try. And we're very excited to announce the launch of a brand new CSE course designed to help you pass the California supplemental exam in record time. You'll get everything you need to pass the CSE on your first try, including expert crafted California specific study materials, a practice exam that is as close to the real thing as you can get, customizable flashcards and quizzes, a structured study plan customized to your exam date. Join today at blackspectacles.com/CSE-pricing to take advantage of a 10% discount for the first 100 members who sign up. And if you're using Black Spectacles through your firm, be sure to let your firm leadership know so they can unlock access for your entire team. Our next ARE Live will be on September 17th, where we'll be covering a CE mock exam. You can go to blackspectacles.com/podcast to sign up. And over on our Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook social channels, we post mock exam questions daily. So if you don't already follow us, I'd suggest that you do. We're at black.spectacles on Instagram and TikTok, and just Black Spectacles on Facebook. And we offer a referral program for firms and schools where if you introduce us to your boss or HR, and if they sign up, we'll give you a $250 gift card of your choice. To participate, follow the instructions on blackspectacles.com/group-referral. And we also offer a refer a friend program where you can sign up to receive a customized discount code to save your friend 15% off any membership, and you'll receive a $50 gift card of your choice when they redeem. You can go to blackspectacles.com/referral to participate. And congratulations to jchang4231. You posted on our Black Spectacles community today, and you just won a free Black Spectacles t-shirt. I'll reach out to you via email to get your size and shipping information, so we'll be in touch soon. And just a reminder, if you'd like to be eligible to win a t-shirt, post a question you have about our featured topic in our Black Spectacles community during our next ARE Live. And our community is always active, not just during ARE Live. So poke around and see what your peers are up to and asking about. Finally, be sure to take our survey, which you'll find in your email after this episode, and share any suggestions you may have. I promise we read every word that you write and use them to tune our next episodes. Thanks for tuning in.